In 1964, Muhammad Ali shook up the world with a spectacular display of dominance against one of the most fearsome champions ever, the great and powerful Sonny Liston. But it was almost all derailed by a shocking development in the 5th round, one that most would call unlucky happenstance, but many insist was foul play. Today we're going to look at the techniques that Ali used to defeat one of the most dangerous fighters of all time, and how he overcame a bizarre, random handicap that almost altered the course of history. Ali had chased a fight with Liston for months. Drawing upon professional wrestling as an inspiration, Ali taunted and provoked Liston every chance he got. Playing the heel to drum up public interest, he called Liston old, saying he needed talking lessons as well as boxing lessons. But most of all, falling down lessons. He called Liston the Big Ugly Bear, saying the world needed a pretty champion. Finally, Liston accepted the fight, proclaiming that Ali wouldn't be pretty when he got finished with him. Most agreed with Liston. In fact, almost no one gave Ali a chance, and with good reason. Sonny Liston was a total monster in the ring. Liston's fists were bigger than most men's biceps. He had an 84-inch reach, and strengthened his neck by standing on his head for hours on end. He had the brains to put these physical advantages to good use, setting up his power shots with one of the best jabs in boxing history. But most overlooked Liston's jab, as the punches it set up tended to leave a much bigger impression. Liston had KO power in both hands, but his left hook was particularly deadly. And Ali, who kept his guarding hand as low as his lead hand at times, was especially vulnerable to lead hooks. In fact, he had nearly been knocked out by Cooper with one in his previous fight. Ali had come back to stop Cooper shortly after, but the public had not forgotten Ali's temporary embarrassment. Anyone counting on Ali's speed to save him need only look at Liston's fights against former champion Floyd Patterson. Patterson's insane hand speed meant little when Liston used his size to bully him against the ropes. Despite all this, Ali's coach, Angelo Dundee, was extremely optimistic. Upon viewing Liston's previous fights, he realized that Liston was weakest against fluid boxers that had great head movement and lateral movement. And those just happened to be Ali's greatest strengths. Ali used complex footwork to circle his opponents on the outside, catching them with whipping jabs before dashing in to throw lightning-fast combinations. He kept his hands low to encourage opponents to headhunt, always staying just out of range, compelling them to overreach. As Dundee said, "I didn't need to tell Ali much for Liston. He already had everything he needed." But the rest of the boxing world was not so convinced. The odds makers had him a 7-1 underdog, and Ali's bizarre pre-fight behavior did little to convince them otherwise. Back then, weigh-ins were usually non-eventful formalities. Ali looked to change all that. He stormed in with Sugar Ray Robinson and his hype man, Bundini, who Ali lovingly dubbed an expert on crazy, all the while shouting out insults to Liston at the top of his lungs. Ali predicted he would knock Liston out in 8, reiterated his belief that Liston was, in fact, a big ugly bear, while he himself was pretty, then let loose what would become his most infamous quote.
"Flow like a butterfly and sting like a bee. Hey! Rubber, young man, rubber. Hey!"
As Liston stepped up to be weighed, Ali told his entourage to pretend to hold him back, then acted as if he was going to fight Liston right there. By the end of the day, the fight was all anyone could talk about. Most sports writers put Ali's behavior down to hysteria, assuming he must simply be scared out of his mind. Although Ali was nowhere near scared at the weigh-in, he was terrified on the night of the fight. This wasn't due to fear of physical harm, but rather that Ali's constant trash talk had painted him into a corner. To quote Ali, "The truth is, every time I go into the ring, I'm scared to death. Because after all that popping off, all that predicting, all those people wanting to see me get whipped, I know I'm in trouble. If I lose, they'll be ready to run me out of the country. I'm on the spot when I'm out there, and I'm scared to death." Most know that Ali's trash talking helped to promote fights and intimidate his opponents, but it seems it also put pressure on Ali to succeed. He was essentially betting his entire reputation on every fight. But luckily for Ali, he was one of the rare few that thrived under pressure. This was evident when the two met the ref in the middle of the ring. Ali stared Liston down with a steady, confident gaze, then shouted one last insult. The two went back to their corners. The bell rang, and finally, the fight began. Ali seemed to be everywhere at once, dancing and feinting with the broken rhythm. He circled inside, changing head slots to draw punches, then rebounding back to change direction in the blink of an eye. Liston pressed forward, at first with his regular plodding steps. But as he kept missing Ali by a foot or more, Liston changed to quick, undisciplined shuffles. Then, he was practically running at Ali. Liston finally managed to connect with 2 hard body shots. But Ali stopped his attack by clinching, underhooking one arm, and tying up the other before walking Liston out of the corner. This moment might not seem like much, but it was crucial, proving that Ali could move Liston around and move himself off the ropes. He would not suffer the same fate as Floyd Patterson. Ali now wisely kept further away, all the meanwhile demonstrating an incredible arsenal of risky defensive techniques. He had been told that Liston's eyes would tip him off when he was about to throw a heavy punch, but even still, his ability to evade punches seemed otherworldly. He pulled back far beyond his base of support, counting on his footwork to save him. He avoided punches by turning his head to let them just skim his cheek. He stepped back into southpaw as he slipped to increase the range of his head movement, which allowed him an easier exit to the middle of the ring. All the while, he kept his hands by his hips, goading Liston into headhunting, making him think that it would be so easy to finally shut that big mouth. This had been the plan from the start, to discourage Liston by proving to him that his best weapon, his jab, was useless. To quote Dundee, everything Liston did came off that jab. It was a timing thing. If he hit you with that sucker, everything else went in sequence. So take it away from him by circling to the left, and he can't hurt what he can't reach. Halfway through the round, Ali felt it was time to introduce Liston to his own lead hand. Ali's whip-like jab did not hit as hard as Liston's, but unlike Liston's jab, Ali's was landing. And so, he could use it to damage Liston's vision, and more importantly, set up harder punches. Ali caught Liston with a number of lightning-fast lead hooks, slamming them into the crevice between Liston's shoulder and glove with surgical precision. Ali was incredible at both noting an opponent's tendencies to track their head movement, and finding the small cracks in their guard in real time. By the end of the round, Ali felt comfortable enough to stand within range of Liston's jabs, dealing out as much punishment with his lead hand as he could. When the two men walked back to their corners, Ali noticed that Liston was still standing during the break. "Man, you're gonna wish you had rested all you could when we get past this next round," thought Ali. In the second, Ali stayed within range of Liston's punches so that he had more chances to engage himself. But this more dangerous range required a whole new slew of defensive techniques, and these were even riskier. Ali parried and caught Liston's punches just as they were about to connect, or stifled them by smothering Liston's glove before he could even throw. He framed off Liston's shoulder to turn his punches off course, then did the same to his head while blocking his vision. Ali took 2 damaging punches throughout the round, both lead hooks. Although they failed to connect clean, they shook Ali nonetheless. However, Ali had plenty of time to recover between each. He was gambling big, but so far, Liston had failed to deal him a hand bad enough to make him fold. But all the same, the close range meant that Liston could now effectively herd Ali to the ropes. So Ali took a page from Willie Pep, weaving as he linear shifted, shuffling out to the inside to transfer to an open stance with his right foot forward. This allowed him to exit exchanges using routes normally exclusive to southpaws. When this method failed, Ali would clinch to disrupt Liston's balance as he threw, tying him up to push or frame to throw his punches off balance. All the while, Ali used his varied jab, targeting either eye from all directions, whipping his hand up from his hip, corkscrewing it over Liston's shoulder, or shooting it out straight as an arrow. The payoff was a tiny cut that opened over Liston's left eye, the first of his career. Ali was now certain he could safely turn up the heat in round 3. As it turns out, he was right. Ali came out and planted himself right in front of Liston. When Liston threw, Ali stood his ground, only taking small steps back as he fired off multiple shots. He pivoted off the ropes and then planted himself right back at mid-range, firing off a 1-2 before just shuffling out of the way of Liston's explosive return hook. He next double jabbed into his signature cross-step, then tracked Liston's head movement to nail him hard on the temple, the most decisive blow of the fight so far. Thankfully for Liston, Ali missed his follow-up hook. But then, Ali pulled off the exact same sequence again, stepping out of his cross-step to land a thudding cross in the exact same spot. This time, Liston's legs buckled, but he managed to get his feet underneath him in time to retreat. Now Ali chased Liston to the ropes. However, rather than attack, Ali stayed at range, stared Liston down, and screamed at him. Whatever Ali shouted at Liston has been lost to time, but it probably wasn't nice, as Liston reversed his retreat, charging off the ropes. Ali backpedaled, then rebounded back to land a swatting 1-2. But Liston now held his ground, determined not to back up again, no matter how much punishment he took. He chased Ali around the entire ring, barreling forward headfirst to finally trap him near the same spot they'd begun. Liston next pounded tremendous hooks into Ali's body. Ali tied him up and moved him to the middle of the ring. And now it was the challenger who refused to keep the distance. Ali stood his ground, flurrying to catch Liston with combination after combination. Each time Liston charged at Ali, Ali would circle away until Liston was spent, then piece him up again. But then, near the end of the round, Liston caught Ali coming out of a weave with the big left hook. Then with a tremendous uppercut as Ali tried to clinch. These punches might have put many of Liston's previous opponents out, but what the world didn't know at the time was that Ali actually possessed a legendary chin. Still, it was best not to test it. Ali didn't take one more punch the rest of the round, and as both men went back to their corner, it was clear to all who was the worse for wear. For the first time, Liston sat on his stool. His corner frantically worked on his cut, which Ali had opened more and more with each landed shot during the course of the round. In the fourth, Ali planted himself even closer to Liston. Despite this, it was soon clear that both men were looking to slow the pace. Ali, because he had only ever gone 10 rounds and hoped to preserve his stamina in case this fight went the full 15. And Liston, because he was exhausted. But then, something insane happened. And it didn't happen mid-round, but in Ali's corner after the bell. Ali walked back to his corner squinting and blinking. As he sat down, he revealed to Angelo that there was something in his eye. For all intents and purposes, Ali was now totally blind. To this day, no one knows what got in Ali's eyes. While many suspected that Liston's corner rubbed something on his gloves intentionally to blind Ali, it's far more likely that the ointment they had put on Liston's previously damaged shoulder got in Ali's eyes. Angelo washed out Ali's eyes as best as he could, but Ali, in major pain, asked for them to cut off his gloves so he could clean them out himself, shouting, "I want the world to know there's dirty work afoot." Ali had been all but guaranteed to take the world championship in a decisive manner, but only a maniac would go out against Sonny Liston while blind. However, Angelo Dundee believed in Ali so much, he sent him out anyways, yelling, "This is for the big one. Now get out there and run." Despite Dundee's words, Ali tried to clinch at first. As would become his custom in later years, Ali sacrificed his body to protect his head. Ali wouldn't be able to clinch much longer, but he could still barely make out Liston, who looked like one big blur. Liston now sensed that something was wrong with Ali, and came at him with everything he had left. But then, Ali suddenly came up with a plan. If he couldn't know where Liston was through sight, maybe he could through touch. He placed his glove on Liston's head, and used it to keep track of his position, framing against Liston's forehead and steering him as he turned away. His use of multiple angles and stances allowed him to do this with either hand. It wasn't much to hold out against a man that George Foreman said hit harder than him, but, as it turns out, it was just enough. Midway through the round, things finally came into focus for Ali. The Blur became a man, and a man can be hurt. By the end of the round, Ali was back to his normal self, shouting at the press section, "I'm gonna shake up the world." Liston walked back to his corner, knowing he had lost his last best chance to retain his title. Ali backed up his words in the sixth, setting up power shots off his jab. By the middle of the round, Ali became the pursuer, backing up the fearsome Sonny Liston. Ali had completely taken away Liston's jab through masterful counters and head movement, and now he was free to land almost at will. His predictions had come entirely true. To quote the man himself,
Clay comes out to meet Liston, and Liston starts to retreat. If Liston goes back an inch farther, he'll end up in a ringside seat. Clay swings with a left, Clay swings with a right. Look at young Cassius carry the fight. Liston keeps backing, but there's not enough room. It's a matter of time, and Clay lowers the boom. Now Clay lands with a right. What a beautiful swing, and the punch raises the bear clear out of the ring. Yes, the crowd did not dream when they laid down their money that they would see a total eclipse of the sunny.
As the world watched the two return to their corners, it was clear to all that they were witnessing history. But then, something incredible and unexpected happened. When the bell for the seventh rang, Liston stayed in his corner, spitting his mouthpiece out to the floor. At some point in the previous round, one of Liston's wide hooks had dislocated his shoulder. He was unable to continue, and the world had a new heavyweight champion. Unable to contain his excitement, Ali danced and ran around the ring. Before delivering his iconic post-fight interview.
Come here, Sam. I'm the greatest thing that ever lived. I don't have a mark on my face, and I upset Sonny Liston, and I'm just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I am the king of the world. Hold it. You're not that great. I'm a bad man. I shook up the world.
Ali had accomplished his dream, but his detractors were eagerly awaiting the rematch. But for now, Ali was champion. According to Dundee, a strange scene unfolded in the parking lot after the fight. Rocky Marciano, who had arrived to watch the fight with Joe Louis, was sprinting across the parking lot. "Didn't you hear?" said Rocky. "Ali's going to get $1 million for his next fight. I'm coming back." "Stand back," said Louis. "I'm going to run too." But thankfully, nothing came of it. You can check out my books on footwork, power, and defense linked below. From the Modern Martial Artist, this has been David Christian, wishing you happy training.